am Dr. Renu Thakur, Chairperson of the Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Today we will do the next module, Ajanta 2. The Ajanta cave paintings spread a lot of information regarding the two sects of Buddhism termed as Hinayan and Mahayana. The present module will help in acquiring knowledge of the Mahayana sect of Buddhism. The walls depict scenes which relate to the Jatak stories, hence connected with the life of Buddha. The quality and technique of the paintings still mesmerize the eyes of the spectators. The caves of Ajanta are situated on the northern fringe of Maharashtra plateau in district Aurangabad of present-day Maharashtra state. The height of caves is approximately 430 meters above the sea level. The only reference to the caves in ancient literature is that by Yun Sang, the Chinese pilgrim who stayed in India for at least 15 years in the first half of the 7th century when Ajanta was approaching its decline. He described the Ajanta caves in a very peculiar manner by describing most of its topographical scenes without visiting the place. The Ajanta caves were built around 2nd century BC and work continued until the 7th century AD. They were excavated over a distance of over 600 yards on the flank of a rock face which juts out like a rounded arc over the Vagara river. The site has a savage grandeur, well suited to inspire both a state of metaphysical anguish and meditation. There are 29 Buddhist caves composed of vihars or monasteries and chaityas or places of congregational worship by the monks and the faithful. The countless sculptures which decorate them were originally polychrome. The subjects and themes on a grand scale were painted on the walls while the ceilings were covered with decorative patterns and serial figures. Only 13 of the caves have fragments of paintings, the most important of which are in 2 chaityas dating to 1st century BCE and in 4 of the vihars. These are painted between the 5th and the 7th century. The Ajanta paintings are the expression of a religious belief and a general cultural tradition. The Ajanta paintings depict various facets of life scenes from gardens, marketplaces, wooden huts, workshop of potters, animals and birds. The first scholarly report on the caves was by James Ferguson, which described the rock-cut temples of Western India in his paper for the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland in 1843. James Burgess and William Gill made copies of some of the paintings and exhibited in London in 1866. Unfortunately, a lot of damage was done to these copies by a sudden fire. Later, some copies were made by J. Griffiths and Lady Harringham and published in 1896 and 1915. The caves are painted all over with the Jatak stories related to the previous life of Gautam Buddha, the life of the historical Buddha, image of Buddha and the Bodhisattvas. Now we will study the historical background of the caves. The Vakataks established their power in Vidarbha in about 250 AD and ruled in this region for about 100 years. In this period, they spread their power from Narmada in the north to Tungabhadra in the south, from Arabian Sea in the west to Bay of Bengal in the east. There are a number of copper plates which have been discovered that have facilitated a reconstruction of Vakatak history. The Vakatak dynasty was founded by Vidya-mitra, who is mentioned in the Purans and also in the inscription in cave number 16 of Ajanta. Vidya-mitra and his powerful son Pravarsen I are the great early rulers of the Vakatak dynasty. 2 branches of the royal house of Vakataks are known, the main branch from Gautamiputra and the Vatsagulma branch from Sarvasen. The devout king Prithvisen's son Rudrasen II of the main line married Prabhavati Gupta daughter of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya, and she was a paramount ruler during the minority of her son Divakar Sen. Pravar Sen too was also her son, and during his rule, a princess of the Kuntal house was married to his son Narendra Sen. Of the other branch, Sarvasen's son Vindhya Shakti triumphed over Kuntal and was succeeded by his son Pravar Sen, to be distinguished from his namesake in the main line. His grandson Dev Sen had a very powerful son named Hari Sen, who was the most important. Dev Sen had a very powerful son named Hari Sen, who was the most important sovereign of his time and was contemporary of Narendra Sen of the main line. The Vakataka ruler Pravar Sen II of the main line is well known for his literary talent and appreciation of poetry. He also supported arts in all forms. This is corroborated by the inscriptional evidence which is available in the caves. Ajanta was in the domain of the powerful collateral branch of the Vakataks, where the Gupta influence had no place, especially under the powerful Hari Sen. The paintings at Ajanta constitute an immense display of Vakataka art. The early caves at Ajanta exhibit architectural features of the early Satavahan period, while the caves of the Vakataks are very elaborate and developed. The paintings entirely cover the walls, pillars and ceilings at Ajanta. Now we will look into the classification of the time period and when these caves were painted. The Ajanta caves has various phases in which the paintings are executed by different dynasties of different period of time. The first period is called the pre-classical phase that continued from 2nd century to 1st century BC. The second is the classical period, that is 4th to 5th century AD. Next is the period of mannerism, that is from 5th to 6th century AD. Then next is Baroque period, that is mid 6th century AD, and the end of the 6th century AD shows the period of decline. The caves show the height of perfection of Vakataka art. The cave number 19 is a Chaitya Hall, and Vihar caves 16, 17, 1 and 2 are most important caves. The majority of the work in these caves was done under the reign of King Hari Sen. His feudatory princes and merchants were also patrons. The cave 16 is said to be the most classical painted cave. The very peculiar features of classical style mean perfect mastery of the subject. Everything is idealized and realism is only for creating things of beauty and perfection. There is dignity and nobility and no exaggeration, no excess, no overstatement and no dramatization. The characteristics are calm, unobtrusive, modeling gentle in the swaying movement of the characters, bear the stamp of the classical period. A wash technique called aeric, creating an illusion of depth, is employed here. In the works before classical period, this technique was not developed. In the classical phase, cave number 2, 16, 19 and 17, pictorial space expands as a continuous web extending vertically as well as horizontally. The Ajanta artists were very skillful in integrating this huge expanded pictorial space and presented an entire story as a single unified art material. The technique of painting at Ajanta is tempera. The materials used are very simple. The 5 most prevalent colors used here are red ochre, yellow ochre, lamp black, lapis lazuli and white. It appears that Vakataka painter had observed nature around him and seen great beauty with intense sympathy. Now we will look into the paintings on the walls of the Ajanta caves. The paintings at Ajanta constitute a great gallery of Buddhist art, illustrating scenes from the previous life of Lord Buddha, from the Jataks and Avadans. Cave number 16. The identification of this painting is controversial. It represents a woman of rank in distress while she seems to be fainting. She is depicted as half of her body is reclining on the couch and her dasis watch her. She is surrounded by two women, one of whom is supporting her back. There are various interpretations available on this painting. According to one, it is related to Shaddant Jatak. The second states that it probably represents Sundari, the wife of Nand, the half-brother of Gautam Buddha. This interpretation seems more likely, as in the rest of the cave, the events from the life of Gautam Buddha are painted. The story of Gautam Buddha, who after attaining enlightenment gave up the throne which passed to his half-brother Nand. After becoming an ascetic, Buddha came to Kapilvastu to ask for alms. By that time, Nanda was married to a beautiful dancer. Buddha tricked Nanda to follow him to the monastery and transformed him. When the crown and the jewellery of Nanda was taken back to his wife Sundari, she fainted in shock and grief. Among all the paintings of Ajanta, this one has received maximum acclaim. This event shows not a dead or unconscious princess, but a dying princess. A moment between death and life has been painted in an amazing form. The moment is conveyed in the motion and posture. The limbs are fully modelled but are lax and limp. The eyes are closed completely. The upper part of her body is limp with a slight hunch in the shoulders. Her head is slightly inclined on the axis of the body. The figures are arranged in a diagonal pattern in a very cohesive manner. The line is perfect and has rhythmic interplay. Empty spaces and full faces interact in a rhythmic pattern. The artists bring out sorrow and impending disaster, but it is not overdone. An entire world of emotion is created there, no tears and no hysteria. The only device used is a peacock lying incumbent in the throes of grief. All the elements of the painting are in perfect harmony. There are other Jataks which are depicted on the walls. The Hasti Jatak from the Jatak Mala is the story of the noble elephant who killed himself by falling from the great height to feed a number of hungry travelers. Some episodes from Mahamagga Jatak are chosen here for depiction. It is the riddle of the son Mahasad, who acted as judge to settle a dispute between an ogress and a real mother of the child, as both claimed the little one as their own. Mahasad asked them both to pull the child. He discovered that the real mother left the hand of the child when saw that her son is in pain. The Sutson Jatak depicted in the cave show how a lioness was infatuated with a charming prince named Sudas, who came hunting to the forest. She licked the feet of the sleeping prince and conceived a child. When born, this child became a cannibal prince, who was finally converted into Prince Sutasom. The painting shows the lioness licking the feet of the somnolent prince. Cave number 17. The inscriptions incised on the walls of the veranda of cave number 17 inform us that the cave was excavated by a feudatory of Vakataka king named Harisen. It has an elaborate carved doorway and a beautiful wall paintings. The paintings in cave number 17 represent the Mahakapi Jatak. It narrates the story of Bodhisattva, who was born as the leader of a troop of monkeys. Once, while tasting sweet mangoes on the bank of the river, the monkeys were suddenly attacked by the archers of Brahmadatta of Benares. The Bodhisattva saved the animals. He stretched his body and made a bridge to save the animals. The theme of Vasantra Jatak, depicting the life of noble prince, is also painted in the cave. He never stinted giving anything begged of him. He gave away his precious elephant responsible for the prosperity of his realm, which caused his banishment from his own kingdom along with his wife and children. Later on, he gave away his wife as well. The panel here shows the banishment, Vasantara leaving the city in his chariot, his life in the forest, gifting of his children to the wicked Brahmin named Jujuk, the restoration of the children to their grandfather, and happy return of the prince and the princess. In this painting, the king is shown distributing alms. A large number of Brahmins gathered to receive alms. Some musicians are also depicted nearby. The prince is in amorous mood. His wife is seated in his lap and he is offering her a drink. The wife is looking at the husband with eyes filled with love. Indra with apsaras and musicians. This painting is full of quality and gives a 3-day effect of colors. The figures of this painting acquire mass and volume. Contrast of light and dark colors is best illustrated in this painting. The Ajanta artist allowed the spectators to read the paintings to their own perception. Indra is flying down, the body is slightly tilted forward and the hand is delicately painted. There is total integration of technique and pictorial representation. The unity is an important feature of classical painting. The flying apsaras. In this painting, the apsaras are showing flying down with Indra. There is a feel of effortless gliding. The lower lip is highlighted. The parts of the body are fully integrated. The eyebrows are treated in single sweep of curve. The eyes are half closed. She wears different ornaments. Ajanta has never lost the moral dignity of humankind. The Mach Jatak narrates the legend of the Bodhisattva who saved his kin from death by making a solemn aspiration to bring down rain during drought. The Matiposhak Jatak represents the story of the elephant who takes care of his blind mother. Captured by the king of Benares, he refused to touch food till the king admitted to return his blind parents. The Sinhal Jatak narrates the story of Sinhal, who accompanied by several merchants was stranded on a strange island. The beautiful nymphs lured them and gobbled them up. The Bodhisattva, born as a horse, offered to rescue the shipwrecked merchants, but those who stayed behind were destroyed by the aggressor's. One of them followed Sinhal in the form of a beautiful woman with a child in her arms and claimed him as her husband. The king accepted her as his queen. This was all done against the advice of the ministers. The Shibi Jatak, the Ruru Jatak, the Nigrodhang Jatak are also elaborately discussed and painted in the Ajanta caves. Cave number 19. This cave has a panel representing Buddha with his begging bowl before his son and his wife Yashodhara. The artist uses heretic scaling. Buddha is large, rock-like, symbolic of his enlightenment. His body is shown in columnar manner in comparison to Yashodhara and Rahul. It is more graceful. It is more poignant scene where Yashodhara is shown pushing her son forward. Cave number 1. This cave contains great masterpieces illustrating scenes from Buddha's life. A large panel shows Siddhartha and Yashodhara, Bodhisattva Vajrapani, Mardarshan, the miracle of Shravasti, and the story of Nand. The master seated under the Bodhi tree in the Mardarshan episode determined to be the enlightened one, unaffected by the temptation of Mar and his beautiful daughters. He was attacked by the mighty opponents. In the miracle of Shravasti, Buddha is shown in various forms before a large gathering headed by King Prasenjit. This was done to confuse the heretics. Only one figure is placed in the classical style and others are post-classical. The representation of Padmapani Avlokiteshwar is important. There is controversy about the identification of this figure. According to some scholars, it is Prince Siddhartha before renunciation. This is said because the women besides him is identified to be Yashodhara. This figure is surrounded by animals. The identification of figure is thus accepted because Padmapani is usually shown with the Amitabh Buddha in his crown, which is not visible in this painting. Avalokiteshwar was the most loved Mahayana Buddhist. The figure is painted surrounded by women, flora and fauna. The dark and light colors are gracefully used. There is no exaggeration in this picture. The Mahajanak Jatak. This is the story of King Mahajanak, who while still young decided to renounce the world. His mother, Queen Shivali, is greatly pained by the decision of her son and tries to persuade him to give up this idea of leaving the palace for good. Mahajanak is obviously determined in his purpose. As a last measure of desperation, she sends for 700 young and beautiful girls and addresses them. After that, the queen went to see the king. Although she met him coming down, she was not successful in persuading him. Instead, thinking that it was a Pachik Buddha who was coming to instruct the king, she made a salutation and stood on one side, and the Bodhisattva Mahajanak came down from the palace. The Champanya Jatak is the story of the Bodhisattva born as a Nag prince. Champanya, who allowed him to be caught by a snake charmer and was rescued by his queen Suman. By requesting the king of Benares to intercede on her behalf, is painted in the cave. Cave number 2 contains large-sized painting of Bodhisattva, the dream of Maya and its interpretation, the descent from heaven, the birth and 7 steps. The Jataks depicted in this cave are the Hans Jatak, Vidhur Pandit Jatak, Ruru Jatak and Avdan. There are fragments of painted Buddhas and also some verses from the Kshanti Jatak. The variation in style and execution of these paintings is noticed by different authors. A decline in the execution is noticed in some paintings as indicated by some rigid, mechanical and lifeless figures of Buddha in some later period paintings. The main theme of the paintings is the depiction of various Jatak stories, different incidents associated with the life of Buddha, the contemporary events and social life. The ceiling decoration invariably consists of decorative patterns, both geometrical as well as floral. Now we will discuss the technique which was involved in the Ajanta painting. The paintings were executed after elaborate preparation of the rock surface. The rock surface was left with chisel marks and grooves so that the layer applied over it can be held in an effective manner. The ground layer consisted of a rough layer of ferruginous earth fixed with rock, grit or sand, vegetable fibers, paddy husk, grass and other fibrous material of organic origin on the rough surface of walls and ceilings. A second coat of mud and ferruginous earth mixed with fine rock powder or sand and fine fibrous vegetable material was applied over the ground surface. Then the surface was finally finished with a thin coat of lime wash. Over this surface, outlines were drawn boldly and then the spaces were filled with requisite colors in different shades and tone to achieve the effect of rounded and plastic volumes. The colors and shades utilized varied from red and yellow ochre, terracotta to lime, kaolin, gypsum, lampblack and lapis lazuli. The chief binding material used was glue. The paintings at Ajanta are not frescoes as they are painted with the aid of a binding agent, whereas in fresco the paintings are executed while the lime wash is still wet, which thereby acts as an intrinsic binding agent. The condition of pigments, the flaking of colors, the lifting up of the paint film in the form of cups and the blistering effect all suggests that the technique of painting at Ajanta was not that of fresco buono, which is not affected by water since the pigments are not softened. At the Ajanta, polished section of the painted stucco clearly shows that the pigment stands out as a thin but distinct layer on the ground. Hence, the flaking of the pigments points to the tempera technique. Now, we will discuss the final phase of the Ajanta paintings. In the 6th century, the Chalukyas replaced the Vakataks as rulers of the Deccan. They are specifically followers of Hinduism and were not Buddhist. In this phase, the overall spatial organization is lost and the composition becomes confused. The figures are differently represented. In the last phase, line loses its suppleness, pointing to the angular and brittle contours. Color loses its plastic modeling and sinks back into flatness, and a very line detaches itself from the colored area, which shows total variations. In the strongly mannered style that develops in 6th century onwards, the heads are often sentimentally bent, the eyes are enormously elongated, the curves of the body accented through the Tribhanga pose. The Bodhisattva Vajrapani and the Mahajanak Jatak are typical post-classical art pieces. Cave number 2 and 26 are post-classical, and there is a strong use of lapis lazuli. The ease is lost in this phase as it was much controlled in the classical phase. The cave number 26 is a Chaitya and is datable to 7th century AD. The figures of the Buddha are drawn in friezes. The art of the sculptor, the painter and the architect had reached perfection in figure drawing and figure sculpture. The artist became one with his subjects, which is evident from exquisite sculpture and painting. The technique and pattern is same, however, the content is different. The decorative elements are given much more prominence. The artist at Ajanta used rotation perspective based on the multiple vision to view the same scene from different perspectives. The multiple perspectives lend astonishing mobility and eliminate static inertness associated with law of frontalism. They set up circular compositions at 2 levels diagonally to each other and connected them by guiding the eye from one corner to the other with the help of architectural devices. The preservation and conservation of the Ajanta caves have been receiving constant attention of the conservators. Various methods have been evolved to check further decay in the cave paintings. The gaps, holes and cavities in the painted surface have been filled to save them for posterity. The conservation and preservation of caves is important for one and all. There is evidence of many phases of preservation which have taken place at Ajanta. The causes of deterioration were identified and adoption of various techniques to recover the paintings well in time helped us to save them. The paintings at Ajanta show growth, zenith and decay. With the advent of Mahayan faith, the paintings grew exuberant and ornamentative. The color scheme also became vivid with the addition of new colors which were possibly imported and therefore were discreetly applied. B. N. Goswami rightly said that the Indian paintings have been variously described as layered objects in which one thing or thought is gently laid upon other.